Welcome all of you between 2 and 3. It's this panel. First of all, I would like to introduce you to the honored guests we have. We have the international renowned artist and Kaohsiung Wu Mali professor also at Kaohsiung Normal University. On my left is female artist Laam Jaffa, an artist in Hong Kong. And we have Taiwanese artist and curator, also extremely well known, and also curator of Daarkuen. And last but not least, Wang, curator of the Xiangning Art Museum. So I'm the moderator of today's session. Prior to this session, I would like to give you an introduction. I have a few brief remarks. The previous theme was we have never unknown each other. And then I realized that all of them, the Chinese was wrong and the English one was also wrong. The Chinese said that we have never really known each other. I mean, actually I think English is correct. The English one is we have never not known each other. So we've known each other all along. So what we've been trying to talk about is the 4 locations across the Taiwanese Straits and about artistic exchanges and about all sorts of programs of artistic exchange. And so our theme is that despite the fact that the 4 locations, due to political, ideological differences and entanglements, or let's say disentanglements, you see that lots of barriers as well as understandings between these 4 areas. And I have been working on a project in Xiangning Art Museum about the cultural exchanges between the 4 locations across the Taiwanese Straits. I just came back from Pingdong Art Museum to Hong Kong because yesterday the 6th project of the Cross-Taiwanese Straits exchange was launched. So this project was organized and sort of driven by Xiangning Art Museum in order to promote cultural exchanges between all these different locations across the Taiwanese Straits. So there have been altogether 100 artists from across the area who are engaged with this. But usually after one time participation, usually you would abstain from participating in the next one. This way you can have more participants. So each time we have different themes, we have different ways of exhibiting. And for example, Laam and Daarkuen, they've all participated in this project. And Mali, she participated in the 5th project and symposium last year, and she was invited as a professor, an expert and honored guest. Wang Dong is a curator of Xiangning Art Museum, so he took part in one of the cultural exchange projects in the past. So this is an ongoing program through which we hope that we will be able to promote the cultural exchanges between these 4 locations. In addition, we hope that through this exchange, the 4 locations and the artists residing in these 4 areas, and also between them and the curators, between different institutions, what kind of situations would arise out of the exchanges they have. So there are about over 20 curators who also took part in this program, and 8 artistic institutions have also taken part in this. So this really parallel, or let's say unparalleled relations also create a lot of issues and troubles of understanding in the process. And probably it's because there are barriers in understanding. There's actually a stronger desire to communicate, to exchange. So as curator from the Chinese mainland, contemporary Chinese art is more focused upon the political reality of China since the opening up in 1978, and since when there has been a lot of social issues, and they've tried to draw upon traditional resources in response to these issues. So their contemporariness is more of a local, let's say, a more existential situation, which has triggered their interest. But with the advancements, or let's say the encroachments of globalization, the contemporaneity of contemporary Chinese art is no longer embodied in the sort of more local concerns, but rather from different cultural circles, different cultural backgrounds, and interactions with different ethnic groups, and all sorts of exchanges, negotiations, and this is where the contemporaneity has been embodied. That's my personal view, my personal take on this. As a moderator, I'm just trying to instigate a kind of dialogue. I would like to leave more time for the guests invited to discuss the cultural and artistic exchanges between the 4 locations in across the Taiwanese Straits. As early as the 1980s, Ms. Wu Mali already started to make initial contacts with artists in Chinese mainland, and when you take part in these international exhibitions where you will have both mainland and Chinese and Taiwanese artists attending, and also I think Wu Mali has extremely close ties with Hong Kong all along. So I think, first of all, we would like to invite Ms. Wu, Professor Wu, to share with us her experience, because she's also engaged in, she does a lot of art. She has also done a stint with publishing house as a translator also, so she has perhaps a more profound insight into these experiences. So let's pass the floor to her. Thank you, Boyi. If we want to talk about the 4 locations in across the Taiwanese Straits, so at the beginning of the 1980s, because I used to study in Germany, I got a lot of opportunities to move around Europe a bit. So I started to get to know the first. Well, I mean, by the first bunch, I mean those artists who actually traveled to the West prior to the Tiananmen incident in 1989. So due to my connections with Fei Dawei, the curator, I had lots of artists such as Gu Wenda, Xu Bing, Huang Yongping, etc., etc. I always got the chance to meet them, and we were pretty much of the same age. And back then, since I come from Taiwan, and in Europe, in the site, like Europe, also later in Japan, I had collaboration with these artists. I saw a lot of differences in our practice. As someone from Taiwan, we are probably more concerned with existential politics. Chinese artists, due to their presence in Europe and the Western world, they're active actually in the different world. They actually are less concerned with the reality. Perhaps they're more concerned about the manipulation and maneuvering of traditional symbols and traditional cultural thinking, etc., etc. So to a certain extent, and I felt we had completely different concerns. Later, we also saw that mainland China underwent very considerable changes. I came to Hong Kong in 1994 to have my first exhibition here, and that was just before the 1997 handover. I still vividly recollect my first exhibition at Hong Kong Art Centre, and back then and it's actually quite around this area in Wan Chai. It is close to the Immigration Bureau and to the Tax Bureau. And it was the first time I had sojourned in Hong Kong for over a period of time. It was 1996. I saw that actually circles of people, they were queuing in front of the Immigration Bureau. They were queuing for the visa just before the handover for the last time, that state struck me, as extremely overwhelming. I was completely overwhelmed. It was just before the handover. In the run-up to the handover, a lot of people who were able to leave managed to leave Hong Kong already, so they didn't know what future would hold for them. So in 1996, I presented my own works for the first time, and it's about telling me your dream. It's titled Telling Me Your Dream. So I wanted to talk to my Hong Kong friends and see what they were preoccupied with. This also kind of showed that was my concern with reality, the political reality. There were very few artists back then. It was actually because, Hong Kong is a quite tiny little place, and it's kind of more of a commercial, it's more focused on commercial activities, and cultural and artistic endeavors were not really that strong in the. And I also had quite little contact with mainland China. I only had a few contacts in Beijing, such as Xiangning, the critic. So, back in the old days, the kind of three locations, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and China, we were not even coming to Macau yet. So all the political status situations, the sort of ecologies were quite different. Up until recently, the closer ties and the tensions between mainland China and Hong Kong, I started to see that the changes in Hong Kong were pretty much similar to what Taiwan was like in the 1980s. The younger generations were more concerned about reality, and they were trying to, through arts and culture, express their views on politics. So this kind of reflections on politics, to a certain extent, can also bring one to reflect on cultural identity, etc. So the younger generations in Hong Kong sort of built very vibrant sort of a culture, and this is kind of familiar to me. It rings a bell, but I think for Hong Kong has a different cultural context. The pop culture and mass culture was immensely influential. So their artistic expression was pretty familiar to the ordinary people, whereas in Taiwan, very people who are concerned about art are mostly like the artistic elites. So the kind of mode of dialogue, there is a sort of a shift or disparity, so to speak. Now I've been invited to the Shenzhen Biennale, and I go to Shenzhen. I've already been there twice, and I'm quite surprised that in Shenzhen you can actually I can stay in Shenzhen and reflect on the past of Taiwan. It's a very modern city, modernized, very rapidly modernized, and it was kind of a similar mode of development as Taiwan in the past. I think maybe Shenzhen took an even more extreme approach. In Taiwan in the 60s, after Second World War, as Taiwan edged towards industrialization, there were tons of migrant workers from the center, from the south, went all the way up to Taipei or southward to Kaohsiung. So it was extremely dynamic during the 1960s and 70s, and then things started to settle down. The factories started to move out of Taiwan. In the 80s, many Taiwanese factories moved to Chinese mainland. In Shenzhen, you can also see sort of a similar situation, a lot of young migrant workers coming from all over China, moving to China, to Shenzhen or Dongguan, also in its surroundings of Shenzhen. So when I first arrived in Shenzhen, the city started to help me reflect on, from a sort of a agriculture society, shifting towards industrial society, from mobility, in terms of mobility, dislocation, alienation, and also the kind of search of future. So this is what actually concerned me when I was in Shenzhen. So as well, we would talk about the 4 locations, including all the above, like Shenzhen, Taiwan, Hong Kong, I would say that they're in here. Perhaps people experience different things in different temporal situations, temporalities, and they sometimes are recurrences. They're not the same. They're not exactly repetitions, but they have different facets and they have shifts. They experience different shifts, and so for me, this is kind of really, it's very nutritious for me, because for me, there's never been a past, because the past may sort of be reincarnated elsewhere. So I have been lucky in that when I went to the Chinese mainland and I was able to get into a city like Shenzhen, so I was aided in that sense to reflect on the past of Taiwan. So thank you, Professor Wu. In fact, when you mentioned the two facets which were kind of resonating with me, was kind of identifying with what she has said when she was talking about, and she was highlighting the fact that Taiwan used to go through these processes of modernization and urbanization, which can also be seen in Chinese mainland. Mainland China has a sort of a specific circumstances. Only 76, the Cultural Revolution ended, and the reforms and opening up marked actually a very fundamental shift, learning from the West and moving towards the so-called modernization. I think in Asia, in the four tigers of Asia, such as Singapore, as Hong Kong and Taiwan, and they had actually rose in the 70s. I think China is going through similar processes. Also, Ms. Wu talked about cultural identity, and this is also something that preoccupied me. I think there's quite an interesting, kind of paradoxical situation in 2012. That's the 100th anniversary of the Republic of China in the Chinese mainland, which it's the 100th anniversary of the 1911 revolution. So there was kind of a Republic of China fever. People started to focus on the period prior, in the run-up to the Sino-Japanese War of 1937, especially the prosperity in Shanghai, and also the historical sort of rediscoveries in Chinese history, re-examinations, sort of attempts to establish a kind of a different kind of framework, and Republican Chinese culture was largely in vogue. So this has been also inspiring me. So after 1997, despite there was a kind of a process of, like, there was a ceremony, but actually I think the real Hong Kong people didn't really identify with mainland Chinese culture even after the 1997 handover. So traditional Chinese culture since 1949, the culture sort of instituted by the Communist Party of China, there was a sort of illusion, or let's say disparity. There's an issue, including, I also know that a lot of young people in Hong Kong, they were kind of resisting the Chinese government in Beijing. A lot of artists and a lot of people born after the 1980s, their works were more in a sort of a challenging, resisting way.
80年代改革开放之后，一段时间，很多大陆的艺术家在抗争这种各个方面的这种，比如专制啊、限制自由啊、民主啊，就这方面也表现得特别的一个明显。所以这两方面呢，刚才吴老师跟我说的这个呢，我引发一点联想吧。那么下面呢，因为我别再耽误更多的时间，我想请这个林兰呢，可以就是他作为一个香港艺术家，但是林兰的身份呢也还有一点特殊，就是他是从福建移民到香港。什么时候？就是你多大的时候啊？12岁。12岁的时候，所以他等于是12岁从大陆，等于移民到香港，完了定居在香港。现在作为一个香港的一个艺术家，那他的身份呢，可能跟比如几代在香港或者出生在香港，可能还是不太一样。那么我想请这个林兰呢，作为一个香港的艺术家哈，又参加过两岸四地，或者说他的很多的一些朋友在香港啊，在台湾呐，还有在大陆都有一些联系。我们可以分享一下这个 林兰小姐的漫谈。
我觉得其实用我来去讲香港，其实蛮奇怪的，因为在香港的时候我总是觉得我很不香港的。然后比如说你刚才说的，比如说吴老师说的那个97年那个排队那个，我当时也是其中一个。然后结果呢，就是我有最后那一批的护照，后来就放了，就是因为发现特区护照更好用。所以
等于你就放弃了那个。
对，那个那个是英国海外那个公民的护照，所以我觉得当时的情况是大家都有一点像一个我们叫做抓水泡的那种，就是救生圈的感觉，所以那个印象我是很深。后来有一些作品也做那一种，但是我觉得在香港是比如你刚才冯老师你刚才说的那个，就说就是年轻一代，就是80后嘛那一代。其实呢，我是很感慨的是那个阶段，就是我们比如说以我现在当时毕业的时候呢，其实那个艺术其实对大家都是蛮遥远的，因为我当时是97年的时候毕业的。但是97年毕业的时候呢，就是前辈他们都97年把事情都做完了，因为当时要吵要闹的，还有就很大幅度的那个就比较反抗的那种都做了。然后我们那时候呢，就是就千禧刚刚出来的时候，其实那时候是香港是最不知道在哪里的，就因为香港的策展人也说，香港就是错过了一个最好的机会走上世界舞台的，因为当那个所有的世界的那个镜头都对香港的时候，但是我们后来97以后的艺术运动其实少了很多，然后一直是到千禧后期的时候才发现，就是那个越来越热闹起来，直到最近这么几年。所以我是算是最不知道自己要在哪里，所以那几年我一直都在海外这样飘来飘去的，也不知道飘到哪里去，就碰巧飘到你们的手上了。所以我以前我小时候的时候，因为我那个身份很尴尬，12岁来香港，就广东话又讲不好，然后很怕给人家知道我是内地来的。那时候80年代那个歧视还是蛮严重的，所以那时候我们好像都要把身份给隐藏起来的。到后来呢，反而是在我在海外的时候，我觉得自己像一个中国人了。这个是一个很奇怪的经验，尤其在东南亚的时候，尤其当我去了台湾的时候，我发现原来很不一样的。然后我去纽约的时候，又发现我这种的人跟真的从台湾来的中国人在海外，还有就是从内地人的在海外是完全不一样的。有可能就是英文还是有一点优势。这样子呢，让我做朋友之间呢，我就好像有个优势，老是帮人家翻来翻去的。然后呢，回到内地就是做那个展览的时候，我觉得那种的感觉是很不一样。我第一次觉得，我完全不怎么了解中国内地的情况。我以为我自己了解，尤其我是那么迟才到香港的。所以那时候才开始觉得要去认识，所以这个很奇怪的经验，可能其他的香港人我不知道他们会怎么想，但是那个是很强的，因为他们可能觉得他们从来不认识中国，所以他们就是之前已经预备了去认识中国。我呢是觉得我一早就认识中国了，然后我是没有预备情况下去的时候，我就觉得好奇怪，这个字我也不懂，我以为我自己懂，然后他们说一些笑话的东西，我是完全听不懂的。结果闹了很多笑话出来，因为我以为是可以帮他们做翻译嘛，结果我翻了，我自己也不知道自己在翻什么的，所以这个文化冲击是很强的，当时，而且 那时候回去的时候，已经就是大陆的那个艺术市场是非常蓬勃的，但是香港呢，好像艺术市场不知道在哪里，还没有发生。其实就到现在，我们也其实没有说，你看到香港艺术家不是真的很多的，所以呢，那种对比非常强烈的，你会发现，然后跟台湾的又不一样，我们以为跟台湾的其实那个味道很类似，但是有时候又觉得，哎，台湾的那种感觉又跟内地人又有一点类似。比如我觉得台湾人就就是很义气的那种，跟内地的也是一样的。在香港，你很少说什么义气。古惑仔才会说义气，然后好像我们就是艺术家之间很少说什么义气的东西什么。所以到台湾的时候，我就觉得，因为在香港听到的都是台湾的政治的东西，所以我每次去台湾呢，我就每次都是对那个台湾的政治很有兴趣，但是呢，真正到下去做事情的时候，我才发现其实也不是很多人在做政治议题啊，其实也就那么几个而已，这种的经验，我觉得。对所谓的一个大中华这种华人的概念，我觉得，开始觉得，哎，自己从哪里来好像重要，又或者其实也不重要。其实还有新加坡呢，他们的华人，他们说他们不是华人，还有这些东西。所以这些东西都是在我这2年在东南亚看华人的世界的时候，有不一样的感觉，是这个意思。
谢谢林兰，但是我有一个小问题哈，简短回答，下面时间不多了。那你比如说你这种身份，还是比较丰富、比较复杂，对吧？它跟那个比如说就是香港出生的或者几代在香港还是有所区别。那在这个你的艺术创作当中，这种身份的这种纠结也好、焦虑也好、认同也好，它有所体现吗？那也就是换一句话说，比如你的这些作品可能跟其他本土的，比如香港艺术家，差别大吗？有差别吗？
其实我的作品，因为我就是这样子，不知道自己的身份在哪里，老是在寻找的，所以我结果呢，其实我的很多的合作都是跟那些比如说我那个妇女那个，其实他们有一些人都是从内地来的，因为就是在香港这样子。当时我跟他们谈天的时候，是因为我们大家都不要讲太多，就明白大家的处境，所以就很容易沟通的。然后我的作品也都是讲人与人之间的关系，所以每次反而也因为这样子。很多话就在不言中，然后就在作品里面出现。但是，其实，在香港这一块，如果人家说研究我这种身份的，其实比较少，就没有人去把这个东西提出来说的。人家就是看我为什么会做那些为人服，他们说我是为人服务，我说不是，我是人家也跟我一起服务的这样的意思。反而在纽约的时候，我就。一直在寻找这个身份，比如说林则徐啊那些作品，在中国餐厅的那种福州人的感觉，那个是没有，那个是一个地域问题，就是我觉得我是在飘着，飘到哪里呢？就发现那里有我的祖辈的一个脚印，这样的感觉。
谢谢林兰，下面我们有请这个。台湾艺术家也是关渡美术馆的策展人吴达坤。吴达坤呢，因为他又是艺术家，又做策展，包括去年还在高雄市美术馆策划了一档展览，还获奖了，叫什么民国来的？
后民国。
叫后民国，叫后民国，其实也是针对这个民国文化、民国时代，包括现在的这样各种各样的关系，所以呢，他的身份也比较丰富。同时呢，其实他在亚洲地区，包括今年还在日本策划过展览，也都是有台湾、有日本、有韩国的艺术家，所以他这方面也是一直关注在这个方面。那么下面我们有请这个达坤， 聊聊。
谢谢冯老师。那其实我觉得我自己比较关注的，从我自己一个身为艺术家的一个养成背景，然后从研究所大学毕业之后就开始到欧洲到美国，在亚洲各地，然后进行一些驻村的一个一些研究项目，还有一些作品的创作。那其实在当时候所有的那些身份认同的问题，其实对我来讲是我离开台湾之后，它才产生、才引发出来的。就是说
After I left Taiwan, I am from the East. I'm from Taiwan. As an artist, how am I going to find my position in Japan or in Europe and America in their art context? So these questions were raised after I left Taiwan. Just now, Mali also said that in Taiwan, there's a lot of critique on the political reality in Taiwan. And art really developed after 1989, after the political situation became liberalized. So in the past, it was high pressure and there was a lot of tension. And in 89, all of a sudden, the energy of the society started bursting out. But we missed that period. We were a younger generation. When I graduated from my graduate program, it was already the late 1990s. So we felt that a lot of things have already been done by our predecessors. Under those circumstances, for my generation, our attention was shifted to ourselves. For instance, how do we respond to the internet, to the virtual world, and to what we see in the society? There were a lot of micro issues in Taiwan, so we were trying to respond to these more micro level issues. What was interesting was that in that process, from 1997 on, curators, the concept of curating actually became introduced into Taiwan, and I started curating. So we are participating when trying to join the world stage, being a curator. Taiwan artists also at the time began to think about joining the Asian market and the world market. We also had different approaches. Some artists were commenting on more micro-level issues. Others were focused on social issues. So after 2000, the art development in Taiwan has been developing in many different directions. From my point of view, in 2006, I began to realize the possibilities. In Taiwan, we call ourselves the Republic of China. But then we were celebrating the centennial of the Republic in 2011 in Kaohsiung Art Museum. I was curating the post-Republic exhibition in response to the centennial, really commenting on the continuation of the Republic in Taiwan in different respects, for instance, the political, the economic, the education, are all issues that we wanted to comment on in the exhibition, either as a Chinese or as a Taiwanese. what is our identity? We want to search for that and comment on that. Of course, we also had a lot of opportunities to exhibit in Asia and in Europe and North America. After the post-Republic exhibition, we're thinking about even larger topics. For instance, a sort of Pan-Asian topic. I'm currently working on the Guangdong Biennale. So artists from different parts of Asia will come and join us. And it's because of this that I'm thinking deeper about the approach, the perspectives that we can take to talk about art in Asia, how art in Asia can comment on the political realities here in this region. These would include, for instance, transnational culture, the impact of globalization, nuclear power, for instance. We could see that Asian artists at different locations in different cities have actually been responding to these issues. So we came up with the idea of working on this exhibition. And so now these exhibitions are being put on in Japan and in Taiwan, so that there's a forum for Asian artists to share their responses to these current issues more relevant to Asia. Mainland China has their own way of thinking, their own approach. We are more focused on the approach which is surrounding the mainland of China. Those cultures who are more related to the ocean, for instance. It's the non-continental approach to a lot of the issues. Indeed, we have met before, but we can rethink and begin to understand and know each other again through this exhibition. Thank you very much. I have a rather strange question in mind, and that is, you are a Taiwan artist as well as a curator. You talked about curating exhibitions covering the Asian concept. Well, what about the opinion of other artists and curators from Asia? Of you, I'm from mainland China, and so I don't know how they view you. Whether you are representing the Republic, or are you representing Taiwan, or just Chinese? Well, this really has to do with how I, myself, as an artist from Taiwan, how do I represent Taiwan as I know it, or China as I know it? The relationship is changing. We have been brainwashed by the nationalist government when we were growing up, because they're telling us you must be a Chinese with integrity. But when we went abroad, we could feel the cultural difference between us and mainland China. I think with communications with the other party, then we can have a better understanding of ourselves. When I was young, I loved to watch Hong Kong films. Actually, Hong Kong, to me, was understood through these popular movies. When I came to Hong Kong myself, I found that Hong Kong is actually already different from the Hong Kong that I knew from the films, especially after Hong Kong became part of China again. And this change in reality have also been reflected in the works of artist friends here. So that poses a question to us, and that is, from what position should we continue to communicate and exchange with mainland China? This would be a very interesting topic. In fact, overseas artists and institutions have been exchanging with us on an equal footing. It actually, culturally and politically, it's very, very difficult to separate the different regions in Greater China. They are all interrelated, interconnected. We may have to search for a unique way to approach these. We, as artists, can be much more imaginative to face the reality. Thank you very much, Daarkuen. I'm sorry we're taking up so much time. You are the youngest, and so you are the last, but not the least. Wang is a curator from Xiangning Museum, Art Museum. Just now we talked about the Greater China Art Exchange Program, and Wang was participating in the 5th round of exchanges. He works in Shenzhen. He was part of the 5th exchange program and has a lot of very frequent exchanges with the art communities in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland China. So now I would like to give the floor to Wang Dong. What his comments are for this exchange in Greater China. The Xiangning Museum in 2008 initiated, in fact, the first art exchange project, including Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and Macau. That was the first exchange project. We thought about Taiwan, but it's a very special case. So for the first project, we didn't want to make it too challenging, so we selected Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and Macau. This year we are starting the 6th project already. Xiangning Museum is located in Shenzhen, a special location. We hope that we can leverage this geographical location to become a bridge between Taiwan, Shenzhen, Macau, and mainland China. We can provide that platform for exchange between these 4 regions. Of course, these 4 regions are adjacent to each other: Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. In terms of culture and in terms of lifestyle, share a lot of commonalities. We all use Chinese, we all use Mandarin, and the Chinese language in the written form. I was born in mainland China. I grew up in China. So I'm 100% mainland China. I don't like being called a mainlander. I think this is rather provincial. If somebody says he is from mainlander, then it seems very disrespectful. If you call me somebody from the hinterland, then it seems, or not that 内地人 in Mandarin, it seems to be more respectful. When I was at school, there was a text article, and that is the treasured island of the motherland, and that's really an article about Taiwan. And we were very interested in the article, and 2 of the students in my class were enrolled in the university, and my teacher said, you must make your way to our treasured island. And of course, eventually I did. So I'm very different from Daarkuen, and I was educated by the Communist Party, while he was educated by the Nationalist Party. And I was told that I must love my party, and eventually we must emancipate Taiwan. And so people at the same age as we are suffering from Taiwan, and so we must study hard and recover Taiwan. And so that was my first impression of Taiwan. And after I started working at the Xiangning Museum, I had the opportunity to travel to Macau. I felt very strange there. For instance, when I was applying for a visa to Hong Kong, because for Hong Kong, I can actually travel multiple times with one visa to Hong Kong. I can record my fingerprint, so it's very easy for me. But for Macau, I can apply for a visa and I can go there, but the second time I visit, I have to wait for a month in order to get a visa to Macau. So I was rather confused. Hong Kong and Macau have both returned to China. Why is there such a difference in terms of the visa? So I have one passport. I have a passage or a visa to Taiwan. I also have two other passports for me to travel to Hong Kong and Macau. I shared something with Lina. My English was rather good. I didn't speak Cantonese, so I had to ask my way when I came to a meeting in Hong Kong. So I spoke standard Mandarin, and nobody wanted to help me when I spoke Mandarin to them. They pretended they didn't understand me, so I was very frustrated. I said to myself, this is discrimination. Okay, if you don't understand Mandarin, I'll speak in English. And so they were very, very happy to hear me speaking in English, and they were very ready to help me. So I said to myself, okay, we may speak the same language. We may be all Chinese. We all seem to know each other, but then at another level, there are cultural differences. There are many differences in the artwork as well, which are very closely related to where the artists live. Artists must thrive from where they live. It was very difficult, actually, for me to communicate with the art institutions in Taiwan or Hong Kong. For instance, from Hong Kong, they say, okay, it'll take us 3 months for the procedures to go through. And then with Taiwan institutions, I can't function like a government-sponsored organization. For me, I don't think I should be bound or limited by the narrow nationalism. I think we should reflect on our own cultures. In mainland China, there's been rapid economic development, but during that process, we're losing a lot in our spiritual world. We're not thinking too much about our lifestyle in a philosophical approach. So we lose our traditions. We do have a Chinese diaspora. I mean, shouldn't we stop and pause for a little bit and think who we are as Chinese speakers, as a part of the wider Chinese diaspora? How are we going to approach our past history? How do we approach this culture which we seem to identify with? So this is a question that I will continue to search and explore in the future. Thank you very much. Wang Dong shared with us his experience, and I echo that. For instance, I flew to Hong Kong from Kaohsiung. When I was going through immigration, I took out my Hong Kong, Macau pass, but then I was told that you must show me another pass because you are from Kaohsiung. And I said, and they told me that you have to have this pass for Taiwan. So it seems that I have to show a different pass, depending on where I came from. That's really confusing.
So, in fact, I've been using a very recent experience and also his experience. It's kind of illustrative of the current situation, status quo of the 4 locations across the Taiwanese Straits. I think it's really created by the obstacles are created by human beings. Thank you very much indeed, and our salon is now over. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Thanks to every of our panelists. Thank you.